World War I was the backdrop of the election of 1916. Wilson is going to run for re-election, and he's going to go against a Republican candidate named Charles Evans Hughes. Wilson is going to be in the process of being nominated, and the keynote speaker is delivering his speech. And he's talking about Wilson's great achievements, and his progressive record was excellent. And he also said he kept us out of the war. And that became a major slogan. Wilson's going to run on this slogan. He kept us, U.S., out of the war. And he's using the pun here, right? In all honesty, he could make that promise, right? But anybody who's looking and paying attention to what Wilson's doing, you could see that he, not so much. We have the possibility of the United States going to war. So he does tell the truth when it comes to keeping the United States out of the war, but he's not exactly telling you the truth when it talks about the consequences of his policy. Wilson wins re-election. His record as a progressive reformer is fantastic. And he found that the war had bogged down in a deadly stalemate in Europe. Both sides started this war with offense on their minds, but they had forgotten about a little technological advancements called the machine gun. This war bogged down to trench warfare. And we have battles that kill thousands in a day. In fact, in one battle, the Battle of the Somme, 20,000 Brits were killed in one day. We pick and we make jokes about the French giving up so quickly in World War I, but we forget the fact that out of a population of 41 million during the World War I times, they lost 1.3 million young men in World War I. Once the war had gotten so far and so much sacrifice had been rendered, neither side's willing to stop. So Wilson is going to acknowledge and recognize that neither side was willing to quit, which meant that Germany was most likely going to go back to using unrestricted submarine warfare. And this is exactly what happens. So when Wilson begins his second term, he's going to come up with a policy known as peace without victory, right? Because he basically is going to say that wars create two things, winners and losers. And the loser wants revenge on the winner. So he's going to try and make sure that the war is going to end before the final bullet, before that peace, the alleged peace that's going to end World War I is achieved, and we'll definitely have a victor and a loser. The Central and Allied powers ignore it. The Germans were the first to move, and on February 1st, 1917, they announced that they were resuming unrestricted submarine warfare. Now Wilson is forced to break diplomatic relations with Germany, and then they had to wait and see what the Germans were going to do. Then very quickly it became clear what Germany expected was what it meant when it comes to going to war with the United States. They were hoping they could win the war before the United States had time to enter it. The best example, of course, is going to be the Zimmermann telegram. The Zimmermann telegram was sent in February of 1917. When a German Foreign Affairs Department, their State Department, sends a telegram to its minister in Mexico. And in it, of course, it's going to be intercepted by the British and given to the Americans. And in it, it says that that Germany expects to be in the war against the United States at some time. And so they made a deal with Mexico that if Mexico joined the Central Powers, if they did that, and after World War I, after Germany won the war, Mexico would get back territory it lost during the Mexican War. So basically, kind of like Texas on the way over to California. Some people say this is a fake document created by the British, but it probably was real. But the point of the Zimmermann telegram is it pushed us closer to war. Then in March of 1917, German subs started sinking American ships. At that point, Wilson called Congress into special session and asked for a declaration of war. Now, why are we going to war? Because of Germany's submarine use and violation of the rules? So what do you think our objectives should have been? Would a reasonable objective be to defeat Germany? Well, to Wilson, that wasn't enough. We began to see the mixing of moralism and idealism once more. Wilson tells Congress that the war he was asking for was going to be called the Great Crusade. It's going to be the war to end all wars. And even better, it was going to be the war to make the world safe for democracy. Does this sound familiar? So Wilson is using idealistic language in when it comes to whether or not this war is going to end all wars. Congress, by the way, buys it and declares war in April of 1917. So how do we get into this war? First, we're legalists. We're going by the rules. This makes us partial to the British side. Then we're going to throw moralism into the mix. And Germany, as well as Britain, violate our rights, but we consider the human factor to be much more of a factor in considering how we respond to Britain more mildly than Germany. Now we're throwing idealism in here, a war to end all wars. Now, what we should always remember is you need to be careful when defining your objectives. Because once you say you're going to do something and then you're not able to do it, people are going to get cynical. Wilson's going to be found guilty of over-promising and under-delivering. Right? We're going to try and we're going to achieve an unattainable objective. And this is going to be, of course, be proven when World War II comes around. Our contribution to winning the war was little. We go off to war in April 1917, and it's over the next year. We had something like 112,000 men die, and I'm not going to be flippant about that number. But when you compare it to the fact that 250,000 Confederates alone died in the Civil War, you can see how much of a sacrifice the United States makes. Our contribution, however, was significant in helping to tip the balance in the Allied favor, and thus winning the war. Once we went into the war, we became totally paranoid about things German. We became intolerant. We passed many laws against sedition and espionage. The University of Texas even defunded its entire German foreign language department. Attacks on things German, therefore, are going to be very, very common in the United States during World War I.